schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, depression, urgent diarrhea. These are mostly things I dealt with my mental illness. As I say in the title of the video, I was disabled for 9 months. Now, I've told this story before, but it was a long rambling video. I was walking outside. The audio wasn't great, so I'm going to try and do it shorter and with better audio this time. I don't want any sympathy for this. It's not something I'm proud of. It's something I'm not ashamed of it, although I have a little shame, just a healthy amount, because it involves lurid details of my life, and it's not something I would just go around telling people or tell to strangers or even think about very much. By now it's been about 5 years since it happened. I got really sick in August 2012, lasted for 9 months until about April 2013. And it was a really horrifying experience. I was just severely disabled, mentally just out of it, psychotic. I couldn't process reality, is the best way to put it. And it was an illness that sort of a recurring bout of it that I've had since I was 17, and it would come and go in serious bouts. So the first time I really dealt with it was when I was 17. I was just experiencing a severe amount of stress after a month. I had a severe panic attack one day. I felt like I was being ripped out of my body, like God was trying to pull me out of my body to be with Him and destroy me. And it was horrifying and disturbing. I didn't know I could go through something like that. And I tried to just recover from it, ignore it, go about my day-to-day life. But that searing feeling of like being ripped open, it started as like a tiny little speck. Every day it kept growing and growing and growing and magnifying until I was just in constant terror over the course of the next, how the hell long was it? It was, I think, over a year. Let's see, I was 17. It ended right before I was 19. Yeah. So about a year and a half. It's hard to believe I went through that because it was torturous. Torturous. I was basically having severe religious delusions, and I had no way of treating myself. Like, I didn't know that I ever needed any kind of mental health treatment. I was talking to a teacher, and I mean, it was good to talk to somebody, but she was giving me even more religious solutions to these problems, which was just, it didn't work at all. It was not workable. Basically, I was very lonely, totally alone, really had no concept of a future. I knew I wanted to be a filmmaker, but this didn't seem possible with these constant terrorizing delusions that God was ripping me out of my body to be closer to Him. And see, I was scared of dying in a way, but not of going to hell. I never really feared that. I was afraid of going to heaven because I felt like it was this torture, this terror, and that God was the worst terrorist of all time, of saying, I'm going to rip you out of your body and you're going to be so happy and smiling. It's like you're going to be in searing pain, but I'm going to inject you with something that's just going to force you to smile all the time and have this bizarre euphoria, like a dysphoria, as a psychiatrist later described it to me, that you're going to be stuck with forever, like paralyzed with. It was horrifying. It was because I took religion seriously in a way. I thought, okay, this is correct, what they teach. Obviously, whatever you give of your life to God is not enough. It's never enough. You're constantly a wretch. You're constantly a sinner. You always have to give more. I thought that was the way of fixing my life. And it was disgusting to me after a while because I realized the hypocrisy of it. Did you like my pronunciation of hypocrisy there? Hypocrisy. Because I knew people who were religious, and they didn't seem to take it that seriously. They're like, oh, it makes me feel good. It makes me feel happy. If they felt terror from it constantly, do you think they would believe that religion is so great and that church is so great? Of course not. They would be even more eager to get out of it than I was. But to me, that's another horrible, disgusting, loathsome failing of religious schools, which are what I went to when I was a kid, which is they never present like an alternative view of life, as if atheism is even an option, or any kind of agnosticism. It's like, well, this is just the world. There's God and there's the church, and that's just how it is. So I didn't even know it was an option to not engage myself in that torture and that daily terror of, it was just a daily feeling creeping in and setting into me more and more that I'm not here. The people around me are not here. I am supposed to be torn away into another world and nothing matters. Because clearly this life is forfeit. And it didn't occur to me, or I didn't really have any idea that this could be a mental delusion or mental disorder. Eventually, after about 18 months, I started to think, like, wanting to escape religion and thinking, even though it was an unthinkable thought to me, I thought there must be, I was starting to feel the hypocrisy of it and a little bit of anger when I was thinking about people talking, oh, it's so great, God does this for you, and I'm waiting for this from God, I'm waiting for the right partner or whatever. I thought, why aren't you experiencing this? How come it's all good and feels great for you? And I'm taking it seriously here. Eventually, just something changed in me, a total reversal of scenery in me, where I realized I don't have to do this anymore. It was like being shot through a tunnel where the stress was so great. I'm like, I didn't even know I could realize that realization could come over me. I was like, screw this. This is a nightmare. I was happy. I didn't even understand or think about things like evolution or any scientific issues. For me, it was just a matter of, this is totally contradictory. This is a life-destroying system I'm caught up in. This delusion was taking me over and destroying me every day and growing and festering worse and worse. And I remember the next day after I woke up, after I was sitting home watching a movie. I was watching Panic Room, directed by David Fincher. And I had this feeling that like just being shot through this tunnel and realizing, oh, this is what I care about. This is real to me, movies. Why is it that this is supposedly in conflict with religion? If this is making me feel like a decent human being, I mean, not just like a decent human being, like an actual person who's here, who can feel things. And I realized most religious people, unless they're seriously like torturing themselves every day for God's sake, they're really just pagans. They have faith in people and faith in the things they like, and they want to feel all those lurid thrills that are supposedly evil, the pleasures of the flesh that Satan puts here for us. They enjoy their daily lives. They go fuck their spouses. They want to enjoy movies and books, and they watch dramas, and they want to feel, and they want to eat good foods, and they want to feel the pleasures of the flesh, but say, oh, well, God did everything. He tortured himself and gave up his life for us, and so that's why I go to church once a week and say a couple prayers once in a while. And but life works out great to me. It's clear God has a plan, because I'm not one of the millions and millions of children who died in childbirth, or women who died in childbirth, or people who died by the time they were 15 or 20 and lived brutal, miserable lives. Oh, life is great. God clearly created the world just for us. What a selfish, narcissistic view. Anyways, I'm rambling now. I tried to sort of recover from all that. It shattered me. It was like I was slowly putting myself back piece by piece for the next year or however long. Now I'm like 12 years, 13 years out from that recovery phase. But basically, by the time I was 20, so spent a good year just trying to piece myself back together slowly. And I remember the next day waking up after I had that experience of feeling like I don't have to be in a church anymore. It still creeps me out to talk like that, because it really is cultish. I thought, like, well, what do I do now? I don't even know how a person lives without religion, like telling you what's right, what's wrong, what you're supposed to do. I didn't even understand and yet I was always sort of an atheist. I always just couldn't admit it to myself, because I didn't know what it was to admit that. Anyways, point is, next year or so I spent just throwing myself. I felt total despair for my life. Like, well, God had basically abandoned me. I had no future. Like, God thought, I don't even care enough about you to try and bring you back. So you're on your own. And I started having other delusions, like the devil was going to possess me. And I was horrified. I thought I was evil for that. I just kept to myself because I was thinking I don't want my evil to affect anyone else. I would get so scared seeing sharp objects because I was afraid I was just going to have to kill myself with them. Not even that I wanted to die or was depressed. I just thought I would have to. Somehow I would be forced to. I'd be compelled to. I was so scared seeing like scissors or a screwdriver at the movie theater I worked at. All I could picture was the metal going into my neck. I don't know why. Like, it's just, that's how it was. But thank goodness I had religious education. Anyways, started getting severely depressed by the time I was 20. Realized I couldn't function. I had an anxiety attack in class. I realized I went to the hospital right then. My dad was there and took me to the hospital, and started going to a counselor and going to a psychiatrist. They said I had bipolar disorder. I don't know how they make a diagnosis that quick. Like in the ER, they said they probably had it. Maybe they've seen it a million times and they know. I don't know. I did get severe mood swings. I would be in the worst, lowest despair, or I would be like elated and feel like everything was great and perfect. So maybe I was bipolar. I don't know. I don't take medicine now for it or anything. I just, try and manage the best I can and have things that are meaningful to me that I care about, especially filmmaking. That to me is everything. Anyway, so by the time I was 22, I was still very volatile emotionally, but I had gotten a lot of counseling by that point, gotten a certain feeling, just a little bit of like some clarity within myself, and a little bit of just acceptance of where I was, but still had this ton of anger in me, ton of depression, ton of self-loathing. I would just get up and want to kill myself. Actually, and when I was 20, before I went to counseling, I would get so depressed when I was working at a movie theater. I would feel like I would wake up panicked, like thinking the world was ending and thinking I was seeing black. And I was just so depressed. It was partly the job, but also my mindset. I didn't even know how to treat myself or get taken care of or get any kind of mental counseling. So I had no idea there was any problem. I thought, well, when things go better for me, I'll feel better. But in the meantime, I don't need any counseling. What do I need that for? And of course, religious schools, if they made any sense, first of all, it's outrageous that they teach kids what they do about accepting religion, accepting this ancient moronic system. Did I say boronic or moronic? Moronic system of obedience and compliance, but also they never taught the value of mental health counseling. What the hell? So I got a lot of counseling, and then one day I had another sort of anxiety attack, like I was being flipped inside out. And I thought, oh no, it's happening again. But this time, instead of terror, it was just this incredible numbness that I felt for the next year. That I lost all. It's like I lost my mental sharpness. I lost my ability to take in movies and enjoy that. I just couldn't process. I don't even like remembering that. So actually, I'm going to just skip right past that. A year later, I sort of recovered after I went through sort of a traumatic experience, but recovered from it fine. That's all I can say. But afterwards, I sort of snapped back into it, still feeling kind of self-loathing. And that was about 2008, middle of 2008. So managed to recover enough to get a job, get to work, because I was out of work that year, that whole year that I was just numb and feeling like I don't believe in a God or anything, but God is still screwing with me or somehow. I still was kind of a mess psychologically, like I couldn't be close to people, and I didn't realize it. And then I went to counseling again for another year, which was very helpful, and just struggled to find anything to connect to people, because the worst part of it was just feeling so incredibly lonely, like I couldn't connect to people. I didn't understand why. And I was 23 at the time, just feeling like I'd never properly learned to form relationships. I never felt like I had a future, even though I knew I loved filmmaking. I didn't know what it meant to actually do it. I had interned at a public access TV station. I had worked at a movie theater just to get the experience of being around movies a lot and around my coworkers who liked movies. But I didn't know what it meant to actually form a future and build a life for yourself. 23 to 26, I think, or 27, yeah, 27, just went on kind of I started making YouTube videos, but I did it occasionally. I didn't take it that seriously. I was doing videography. I washed cars. Eventually, what happened, I was doing videography. I was in Atlanta. So I was having a good time, basically, a decent success doing videography for an entertainment agency. I was in my hotel room in Atlanta, I think my first or second night there. I had been feeling a little bit uneasy, like I could feel the panic opening up again in me, like I had experienced when I was 17. And all of a sudden, it was like being shot through a tunnel again. I was lying in my hotel room. I don't even like talking about it. I don't like remembering it because I can trigger those emotions again. And I'm happy to not talk about it. This is not cathartic for me. It's not like I need to confess it. I say it because, I don't know, I'm a storyteller. I like telling stories. Something I learned recently is like I have to make films. This is like a short film. I have to make movies. I have to tell stories. And that was good to learn because it was like what Martin Scorsese and other filmmakers and writers had said, and that I had heard, but I didn't really understand it for myself if that was true for me or if it was just something I wanted to do. They said you're a writer or you're a filmmaker if it's because you have to do them. Like, not because you want to, you have to. I didn't realize what that meant until I was really thinking about it today, even though I've done it compulsively, like every day for years, on some level. Even if I didn't film something, I was working on it somehow, or thinking about it, or just remembering it, triggering the feeling in me of watching movies, that certainty of knowing this is what I want to do, being connected to movies somehow. Again, I realized the last few days, like, oh, it's something I have to do. I forget how that ties back into what I was talking about in August 2012. I was in Atlanta in my hotel room. That feeling that had been sort of bubbling up the last few weeks, but I felt like, oh, my life is pretty decent, on track right now. And then I got that panic attack again. But this time it was like being shot through a tunnel, like this shakiness I had, like, oh no, it's happening again. And Lady Gaga's Bad Romance started blaring in my head. I don't know why. I don't dislike her or anything. I wasn't, it's not like I listened to her music other than I had just happened to hear her songs because she was very popular at the time, wherever. I just heard them on the radio or something, or in stores. So I knew it, but it wasn't a fan of her. I admire her. She's very talented, but it's not like I was especially a fan of hers. Anyways, point is, I heard that song blaring in my head. I thought, oh no, it's happening again. And I felt like shit afterward. I felt horrible. I felt like I knew it's happening again, like these religious delusions, God's destroying me somehow. The best I can describe it, the next 9 months, it was like gradually being dosed with the worst hallucinogen of a drug that just made me psychotic, unable to function. So I had to do the videography. That was really scary. I was trapped the next 4 or 5 days in Atlanta, feeling extremely lonely. Like, even though people are around me, it's like being in this weird fog where I couldn't connect with anybody. I knew, by the way, so I contacted one she was a hypnotherapist. Contacted her while I was in Atlanta, saying I need an appointment again. I had went to her once or twice before. And I said, I need a point, like I'm getting these horrible thoughts again. And I struggled to get through those next few days in Atlanta shooting videos. While I was shooting, I was sort of able to push things aside in a way, but it was like this horrible bear trap clamping down on me. It was physically painful. And I was shooting and going back to the hotel room, not able to enjoy myself. Like, I don't know how to describe it. It's like a chemical that cut off the parts of my brain that needed to communicate with each other. Like, I couldn't enjoy food really, like, I was getting in pain, and I was realizing these delusions that were constantly in me were going to get worse and worse. And that was kind of one of the worst feelings about it, is knowing this dread is of, like, I'm 27, I thought I finally escaped all these delusions and mental illness over the years, and now thinking, well, I had a good run, but I don't know how to escape it this time. It is setting in so horribly and powerfully. I don't know how to avoid it. I thought I cleared all that up and dealt with it. Didn't know what to do. So came back after 5 days, just wanted to throw myself into film, thinking I gotta, like, sort of inject myself back with that feeling of being back grounded in the real world, which is, by the way, how when I was 19, how I really recovered as much as I could. I was extremely depressed, but how I could feel like myself again, which was just throwing myself into watching movies, studying them, everything I could to try and rebuild. Somehow that was like rebuilding myself. It was like putting the pieces back together that could feel emotions again, because it felt like I was not here anymore. It was horrifying. I could feel no comfort or pleasure in anything because I was in searing pain. Anyway, so 2012, August, I get back, struggled to get through the videography the next few weeks with the client I worked with. It was a company, and it was so agonizing. I couldn't do it. I was spending a bunch of money on the hypnotherapist. I wanted to get out, literally just drive away and escape all I could. I would go drive further and further out. I would drive like 40 miles. At one point, I went with my parents to McDonald's just to be away, feel like I was escaping, and it didn't help. Like, I was in such searing pain. I could not enjoy anything. It was, I don't know how to describe it. It was like, imagine some kind of like a Chinese finger trap, but the more you try and pull away from it, the more like razors cut into you. It was physically painful. I was beginning to have trouble sleeping, having the delusions that God was trying to destroy me, but there was no escape. What could I do? Again, I'm surprised I'm even remembering this now, because I've really come a long way since that point. But I was resisting this. Again, I don't know how to describe it. And I knew I needed medical treatment. I went right away to the county clinic because I couldn't afford, a private physician, and I took some tests. Even being in the waiting area was horrifying for me. I could not sit like I am now and just enjoy. I don't even know how to say it. Not enjoy, but just feel like things are relatively okay. Like, I can physically feel my body. I can feel myself. I have my identity. To me, like, Angelo was gone. He was going, and I didn't know what was going to be left. And again, I was thinking, well, at least I lived to 27 relatively, of sound mind, and after that it's just like, you just give up and not care. Even though there was nothing, I was losing my ability to care, not care, anything. It was just like my brain was shutting down, and all that was working was just lots of pain was being put out, physical pain, delusions, and I was losing the ability to sleep too. Each night it was getting harder and harder. Watching TV, and as much as I love movies, watching TV or movies became excruciating. I could not do it. If you look at my videos from August 2009, they're these stupid, simple little videos. I did review Magic Mike. I was somehow able to watch that, but you see I look bad, like I didn't shave, and it's hard to take care of myself because I was just losing the ability to enjoy anything, losing the ability to laugh. I don't mean like I couldn't physically laugh, just I didn't, there was nothing, like humor was something that was gone from me. And instead I was feeling horrible pain. I don't know how to do, again, I can't convey that to you. I can't transfer to you that understanding of what it was like. Just imagine being on a crazy, like, dulling drug, that, like a painkiller, muscle relaxant, but also something like fire inside you that just cuts you up and burns you. It was just horribly painful. I was having a lot of trouble sleeping. I was already just planning, like, not seriously planning, but thinking, I gotta kill myself to end this time. I can't go through this again. And I even went to the emergency room, packed a bag, and figured they're gonna put me in the mental hospital because I said like I'm suicidal, but they wouldn't put me in the mental hospital. They said, well, just go home and whatever, get treated. They gave me some Klonopin. I slept for 15 hours, which surprised me, and I was grateful to sleep for once. But after that, it didn't work as well. I only had a short supply, and so it didn't help me sleep much after that. I was getting in such excruciating pain. Eventually, I was meeting my client. I told him I can't work for him anymore. I'm getting really sick. I drove to meet him, came back, and I was with my mom. The idea of being alone was so incredibly painful to me. I couldn't drive without her. I drove with her like 30 or 40 miles to see him one last time. The whole way there, I was having trouble sort of driving. I was going over the speed limit. I was like, had this urgency in me to just keep moving. And then on the way back, I started panicking more and more, and I realized I was losing control of my reflexes and my ability to sort of react, my reaction time, my reaction ability. I was at a red light. I was so scared I was going to hit the gas and not be able to control myself. I was pressing my foot constantly on the brake pedal, like reminding myself, you gotta put your foot on the brake, you got to. I was losing my ability to react properly. And I was so scared I was going to crash the car because I don't know how to describe it again. I can't convey it to you. It sounds silly, like, well, what are you talking about? You're obviously able to control yourself. Imagine taking some crazy injection that totally shuts off parts of your brain from other parts of your brain and your body. I just knew I couldn't control myself. I mean, almost like being drunk. I just couldn't control whether I was going to be able to drive properly and not crash the car into a wall. Not that I wanted to. I'm just saying my reflexes all of a sudden were shot. My reaction time, my reaction ability was just going away. So I went through the light, immediately pulled over somewhere, tried to figure out what to do, called a few people, finally called my client. He came over, somebody dropped him off of my car where I was, pulled over by a gas station with my mom. He drove me home. He had someone pick him up from my parents' home where I was staying at the time. And after that, I basically couldn't drive. I say basically because after 2 or 3 weeks, I was sort of able to a little bit, like short distances, but it was still very scary. I was in horrible pain. I was constantly panicked, and I was having the severe religious delusions like, oh, I have to get relief from this pain by going to church. I thought, well, I've denied God so much, and even though I'm an atheist, and I didn't believe in it, but I felt like, well, I just have to, whatever this is. And sure enough, going to church didn't help. It was like a sort of a drug that could, again, it was not like a pleasurable thing, but could sort of really top off a little bit of the pain. Like if you're pouring beer and there's foam on top, just cut away a little bit of the foam. But it was not at all a good thing I was going through, and it was not an escape. And I was even trying to go talk to priests and preachers and pastors, but even then I wanted to run out of church. It was horrifying. It was even more horrifying thinking this is a cruel, inhumane system. According to them, everything in life is evil. The pleasures of the flesh, everything here is bad because you have to forfeit. Why would you want to be alive when you could be dead and with God and paradise forever? Even 1 trillion years is not the beginning of it. It was so horrifying to think. It's horrifying now for me to think about, to recall that, because I also have this delusions. Just disgusting, selfish, this idea of reward forever. And, oh, God picked me for this. And it's so great. Thank goodness I'm not like Angelo, who's being just tortured. And here's the thing. If it was all true, everything the church was saying, what would it matter if I was being tortured? Oh, it's nothing. It's just a short little trial that I would live the rest of my life, and then it would be done. So this life is totally forfeit and worthless. That is a horribly, a sentiment full of despair and terror and horror. I don't see how any moment could be pleasurable thinking that. You're hypocrites, you religious people, if you think you could go through your life and like, well, that doesn't matter. I'm going to enjoy myself now, clean my room, take care of my spouse and do whatever. Why bother? Clearly, it's better to give it all up for God. What could you possibly benefit by trying to maintain the pleasures of the flesh and of your own life? But why would you ever want any private time? It's the best thing. Isn't the most amazing thing this magical system there? Anyway, so I was torn in my mind, and I was just, again, in horrible physical pain. I was sleeping less and less. Like I don't even know how much, it's sort of a blur how much I was sleeping when, but after about what was it, like 2 months or so, 3 months, I threatened to kill myself. Somebody called the cops. The cops came, took me to the emergency room, put me in an ambulance, took me to the mental hospital. I stayed there for 5 days. And that was horrifying. The hospital itself was good. The staff there were great. Like, they were so compassionate. One lady was in a bad mood one night. I didn't like her, but everybody else was like young people mostly. They seemed like, you know, they all really want to be there and want to help people. But I was in there, I think it was Columbus Day weekend, I believe. So I went in on a Saturday, and the thing is, I was in this small, like, basically one hallway, the other hallway, it like, you know, went like this, and I was in my room with another person there, and I had to be there all weekend and then Columbus Day because I couldn't get out of that one little wing of 2 hallways until the doctor came in and was able to clear me to be in the larger portion of the hospital where they had, like, it was like a college campus. And the thing is, those 3 days, I was so horrified and worn down by being inside and scared as hell, feeling like my life is destroyed, it's over, and I just have to accept it, and that's it. And like, I was just busy trying to accept it. Like, that's it. No sense in caring, you know, wishing for anything else. This is just how I am. I'm in such horrible pain and delusions, and anytime I would try and think of a movie, it was like, again, that bear trap squeezing down on me. It was horrifyingly, shockingly painful. I just couldn't do it. So I was just busy trying to accept that my life is over and there's nothing pleasurable. I was in constant searing pain, couldn't drive. Those first 3 days wore me down psychologically because I was just so upset at being trapped in these two hallways again, and I was in the ward for the sickest people because I was there for an immediate suicide watch. So I was there with the sickest people screaming all times of day. This one guy was the most racist asshole I've ever met in my life. This Korean guy who had daddy issues. He would talk about how his dad was so hard on him and nothing was good enough for him. I think his dad was in the military. He would make fun of one of the staff members who had a foreign accent. He was such a fucking jerk. And just a hateful and arch conservative too. He was complaining about, he's like, the only reason I'm here is because I got in an argument with my neighbor when I was smoking on my porch, and you know, it's the liberals, you know, the liberals are just trying to destroy everything. He was such a fucking hateful asshole. So after, I think, the 3 days there, my parents were visiting me, so they had good visiting hours, and again, the staff were helpful. They were putting me on risperidone while I was in there. Again, so compassionate, the staff, and helpful, but I was just horribly, you know, devastated, and I was having even more trouble sleeping. And I think the last 2 days they let me into the larger areas of the mental hospital, but by then I was developing akathisia, which means compulsive movement. For me, that meant compulsive pacing. I could not stop pacing. If I stopped pacing, I would be like this, like slamming my feet on the ground, shaking, and sitting was horribly, it was like a burning itch. I could not sit. So I was pacing uncontrollably. I don't even remember if I was sleeping much at all. I think the last night, I'm not sure I slept at all there. The night before, maybe I slept an hour or something. This horrible compulsive pacing. I felt horrible that I couldn't connect to the people there. I wanted to be supportive to others. You know, I met young people. One guy was homeless. He was super nice and cool. He was complimenting me. He's like, because there was like an activity group activity where they kind of quizzed us and talked about current events in the outside world, and I mentioned something about some political conflict in an African country, I can't remember, and the guy came up to me afterwards, this homeless guy, he'd been staying there for a couple months. He's like, wow, how'd you know that? You know, he totally like level-headed normal guy. I don't know why I forget why he was there exactly, or maybe it was partly because he was homeless and they helped him out. But I remember just feeling so horrible. I couldn't connect with them at all. I'm just like out of my fucking mind, like pacing constantly, unable to stop. Another guy who tried to kill himself because he was delusional, super nice, like seemed like a nice, innocent guy, but he had these delusions where he wanted to kill himself. I said, don't do that. He said, okay, I won't because of you. So anyways, I got out of there. After the day after I got out of the mental hospital, I was so fucking stressed, and on top of just it's like my autonomy was gone. All that was left is searing pain, akathisia, and delusions that God is destroying me, this constant oppression that God is destroying me, and I'm not, like, it's wrong that I'm alive, and that I have to keep destroying myself, but there's nothing I could do. What could I do? I was trapped in this body and in this bad mind. The day after I got out of the mental hospital, my heart rate was racing constantly for 24 hours. Now imagine you go running for 10 minutes or whatever, 15 minutes, and then when you stop, your heart does not stop racing. I was so exhausted after 24 hours, I was starting to fall asleep standing up, but I couldn't sleep because my heart was racing so badly. I tried to lie down, I couldn't lie down. It was just constant. Imagine this beating inside your head. I tried to lie down, couldn't lie down, got up, would start to fall asleep, lie down, it couldn't hold still because my heart was racing. Eventually I got my dad to drive me to the ER. I was scared of even being in the car with my dad because my sense of motion was so bad. Went to the ER. I told them the situation. They said my heart rate was 120. By the way, I literally thought I was going to die because my heart wouldn't slow down. I don't know what would have happened if I didn't go to the ER. I went to the ER. They gave me an injection of Ativan. The instant that needle like hit my arm, they put the injection and slowed down my heart. I was like, oh, relief, thank goodness. I thought for sure I'd be trapped and I wouldn't be able to hold still. And actually, when I told them I got out of the mental hospital yesterday, I was so worried they would try and put me back. I said, like, my heart's racing. I just got out of the mental hospital. I said, by the way, I don't need to go back. Thank goodness it slowed down my heart. I think I was able to sleep that night. I don't remember because I literally thought I was going to die of this. And there was nothing I could do. And that Angelo is gone. I'm just this sick person, just trapped in this bad mind. That was about 3 months into my illness. At that point, the next 6 months, I'll just keep it real short because I've already gone on long. The next 6 months or so was just sheer getting the sickest I thought I could ever be, regretting my life, regretting everything, thinking I'm a failure to everybody I've met in life because I can no longer be there for anybody or anybody who ever liked me. I'm nothing they would like anymore, and I can't be anything they'd like anymore. I'm trapped in in this mind. I was in searing pain. All I could do was be in the house, and I was just in my parents' house. Again, I had to rely on rides to go to the clinic where I was getting medicine, psychiatric medicine, which didn't help. All right, I just had to restart the camera, and I said, fuck me, as I realized the microphone I have off camera was not recording, so that's why the audio wasn't so great. That part, whatever, I don't even want to start it over and do that again. Anyways, worst part of getting out of the hospital was, first of all, severe pain. Wanting to die so badly. I remember being in chat rooms for depression, just constantly saying I want to slash my throat. It's the only thought that gives me any comfort. And I didn't even want to be saying it and putting out these violent thoughts because people were saying, like, we don't want to hear about that. They were nice, it's just I was in such horrific pain. That's the only thought that gave me comfort. And yet I couldn't do it because I thought, well, that would be such an indignity to me to die like that. But I thought for sure, I was 100% sure this is going to be the rest of my life. I'm going to have to be taken care of by others the rest of my life. I can't function because what I was doing when I got home from the hospital was pacing 23 hours a day uncontrollably. Like it was, the urge was so horrible. Basically, a unable to sleep more than maybe 45 minutes a night. Because again, when I try and lie down, I'm like this, like just uncontrollably getting up to pace, not able to process reality. I was trying to fill out forms to like see if I could get any kind of welfare assistance, and I even trying to fill out the forms was torture. I was scared, so scared of being alone. I was scared of showering or shaving, being in the bathroom. Going to the bathroom was, I don't even know how I did it, because again, I was in such pain that being alone in a room was terrifying to me. Now, as my normal self, I love it. I like being by myself. I like just something about my imagination goes free when I'm able to just daydream by myself. It was just so scary, and some days all I would do is just go between my room and the bathroom. My mom would bring me food, and I was again just but also had a very hard time eating, swallowing. I would barely eat for days. There were some days where my mom would force me. She would get so mad, and she was not nice to me, by the way, through this time. I mean, she sort of like was concerned about me, but she didn't show it. And she was like just nasty and angry when she wanted me to eat. She made me eat a few spoonfuls of food a day because I really did not want to eat. She would get mad and then just stuff her face with food and say, I don't care. I'm getting so mad. She'd grab a bunch of food and eat it because she was sick of me being around the house sick. And yeah, I know, so, like, she's nice or whatever. That's the truth. That's how she was. She was very mean about it and selfish. One day I was telling her, like, I don't feel anything anymore. I don't care. Like, I was like just manic. I mean, not manic, but that's how I sounded. It's like, I was like just trying to, remember my life the way it was before, and thinking, like, saying I don't even feel any interest in women anymore, anything. I feel nothing like myself. And she's like, what are you saying? Are you gay? I was like, I don't know what my answer was or what exactly I said. I don't feel anything. She's like, Angelo, if you're gay, I swear I'll bring the hammer down on you. Now, what the fuck is that? That is so nasty and selfish and hateful. If I was gay and I was healthy, that should be the happiest thing she could think about. But anyways, I was pacing basically 23 hours a day and sleeping between maybe 15 and 45 minutes a night for, I forget, a couple months, not the whole 6 months. That part lasted maybe the worst of that a month. And meanwhile, 4 in the morning, 5 in the morning, 6 in the morning, 10, noon, 3 in the afternoon, 5 in the afternoon, 7 at night, 9, 10, midnight, just pacing constantly, miserable, trying to figure out, is there any way to get this pain out of me? And then I started like bobbing my whole upper body up and down like this, like while I'm pacing constantly. And meanwhile, I'd look out the window, sometimes see cars driving by and thinking, how does everyone else not experience this? This to me is like what it means to be alive. I don't remember what it was like to not have to pace uncontrollably and be in searing pain all the time. By this time, I was able to sort of get it out of me, the feeling of that need to go to church, that somehow that would help me, because it didn't. It was so incredibly terrorizing to me and terrifying that even now to recall it a little bit is uncomfortable. And that I just resigned myself to, like, hey, this is it. Like, staying in my house, looking out the window a little bit, terrified of going outside. I had horrible vertigo, where to the point where I mentioned in another video, I have altocellulophobia, which is a fear of high ceilings. Normally it's workable. Actually, I just remember this as I was saying this part of my illness. My fear of high ceilings became so horrible, like I was scared of being basically anywhere, because even though, like, I would lie down in my bed and look up at the ceiling, which was maybe 8-10 feet up, I constantly was hallucinating that I was hundreds of feet in the air and about to fall. And I had to look up at the ceiling and force myself to look at it and make myself remember that I'm actually inside my room and that the ceiling is right there. So if I had to be out, like, I was so scared of being out in the car with my dad already. I didn't trust him driving, or really anybody. So I would be scared of being out and like going to the county clinic and then looking up and seeing a radio tower nearby. I was so scared of it. I would have severe vertigo, so I would get really sort of dizzy too, and this feeling of like I'm going to fall over, like gravity isn't working, sort of I'm going to fall over to the side. It was really, really just brutal. The short of it is just going through that for months. The constant akathisia, inability to swallow, or difficulty swallowing and eating, horrible fear of being outside, horrible fear of being alone, thinking that eventually my parents who are taking care of me now while I'm 27, 28, they're going to die, and then I remember thinking I couldn't even properly grieve because I can't feel my own emotions. So I'll be constantly torn open, miserable, going to have to rely on somebody to take care of me the rest of my life. Meanwhile, I'm not myself. I'm not a person. I can't talk anymore. I could barely talk to anybody. I had a friend call me about something. He left a voicemail. I couldn't even call him back because I couldn't speak. I was just like, it was just to try and form thoughts and form words was like that bear trap squeezing down on me. It was so painful. During roughly my worst point, I think it probably was my worst point, I was in such horrible pain and so delusional and psychotic that I had on for some reason, the only TV shows or channels I could watch that weren't extremely painful, because they reminded me of, just normal life that I could not have. To me, this was normal life now. I was like, I don't know how everybody else isn't walking up and down, flailing like crazy 23 hours a day. The shows were, first of all, Fox News, and what was it with Neil Patrick Harris? How I Met Your Mother. The only time I've watched that show. To try and watch any other show, I would try and put it on. It was just so painful. It was like a bear trap squeezing down on my heart. It was so physically painful. It's hard to believe I could feel such physical pain. I didn't know I could feel pain like that. That I couldn't watch anything else, and even those were painful too. Possibly my sickest day, I remember one day they had in 2013, I guess, by then, or maybe 2012, Palestine was, I guess, firing rockets at Israel or Hamas or something. And I remember it was the first time I saw the news of Israel's Iron Dome. I had never heard of that before, where they fired their own rockets to intercept those missiles. I remember seeing footage of that and the newscasters on TV, and I was so delusional and psychotic and hallucinating. I was watching those news anchors on TV and thinking about those people on TV. I don't even know what's happening. I don't even understand that this is TV. Like, I don't even understand like what these people are doing. It sounds so weird because I know it now while I'm saying it, but I didn't understand that they were news anchors doing a job, that they were just people. Like, I'm watching these images on TV. I don't know what they are. And it was just so like just so painful. And again, it wasn't me. It's just like I was booted up on this horrible software that was just running forward and could not be shut down. And again, thinking this is going to be my whole life. There's no point in, thinking anything else with it. It was just waiting to die, hoping I would die, hoping I will drop dead from exhaustion, from pacing all the time, or from malnutrition, or from some illness that would kill me, because I don't want to live like this until my body's all rotted away and I'm still sick like crazy. And I've had to go through 40, 50, 60 years of that, just wishing I would die. And thinking this for sure will never go away. I was 100% sure. You guys have to, I'm not saying you have to understand this. It's just the weirdest thing to think that I was certain that this time I could not get through this illness. 17 I did, and again at 22 I did, but this time I just knew it was not going to happen. Because I didn't know somebody could get this sick. I didn't know I could be in so much pain. Just constantly pacing. I mean, that was enough to make me want to kill myself. And if you look it up, akathisia, it does make people want to kill themselves. Just imagine for yourself pacing 10 minutes or an hour or 2 hours. Then imagine doing it for weeks and weeks. And if I had to go anywhere, sit down in a car, I was like, sometimes I would just slam my feet down and scream because it was so hard to sit. And my parents just didn't understand it. You know, get my dad like totally out of it. You see how he is. That's how he is always. Just like, huh? What? If I mentioned it now, he wouldn't even know. He wouldn't. If I said, and I've said this to him, like, remember the 9 months I was sick? He's like, what? Really? You were sick? Even though he visited me in the mental hospital, he doesn't remember that either. And my mom just on autopilot. She'll say, "Oh, she was so concerned and scared." You know, at a certain point, there's no excuse for not showing basic decency. And how crazy is it the idea of just showing decency to someone who's sick. To this day, she won't apologize for it, or especially the comment, "If you're gay, I'll bring the hammer down on you." It just, I don't care. She'll get angry about it. Yeah, whatever. She's got her limitations, her deficiencies that make. But I don't get it. What excuse is that? It's a choice. Okay, 6 months basically going through that. The akathisia stopped at I was so, unwilling to go through more of that. Eventually, one day, it sort of calmed down to where I felt it get out of me in a way. Like, oh, okay, I don't have to pace constantly. However, I was still extremely sick. Still, if I was talking to somebody like, I was applying to go on disability because I thought, well, this is going to be the rest of my life. All of a sudden, I wasn't able to, I could sleep, but I could only fall asleep by 7 or 8 in the morning and wake up at 3 in the afternoon. And still thinking this is going to be my life. And the only way I could talk or do I couldn't watch movies. It was too searingly painful. And that was a horrible thought for somebody who loves film, wants to be a filmmaker. I couldn't even think of it. I tried in my head to think the thoughts like I do now constantly, 24 hours a day basically of focusing on film and wanting to create films in my head. To do that was so bitterly painful, I couldn't. It was like a knife in my back constantly as it was, and then on top of that, this bear trap feeling clamping down on me when I tried to think of films. And I had a little bit of that the other 2 times I was sick. Anyway, and all I could do was play Counter-Strike on these jailbreak servers where you weren't shooting at people. It's like you play games where the prison warden gives orders and you all have to obey them. That's all I could do all day. And it was so sad for me thinking back to my life and what little socialization I had and what little friendships I'd had, and thinking those are done. That's it. Like, that's all I'll ever know. I was by that point, because I had cleared up that fogginess just slightly, 1%, it was even more sad for me thinking about that. But I couldn't cry, I couldn't do anything because I was still just in this psychotic feeling, this delusional feeling of pain. And all I could do is just regret it and thinking this is it. This is all my life will be. So eventually, I started forcing myself to walk around outside. I was in such bad shape, I would be out of breath and still sort of confused being out, and I was completely broke. I had a few dollars, and I started just trying to walk around a little bit. I would even walk the however many miles, 2, 3, 4 miles to the disability lawyer's office to go apply. And then walk back, but I was trying to make myself, because hey, for the first time I could walk around outside in like 8 months. Started walking around a little bit more. Then one day I was able to drive to an old bar I used to go to, and that was an improvement. And then just gradually, I think by April, I called the videography client I had back, because we had more than just a working relationship. We sort of relied on each other for a lot of things and trusted each other. I called him and said, hey, I think I can work for you again. And even though still by this point I was nowhere close to being myself again, I wasn't in that absolute pain. I could at least work. Now by this point I still couldn't sleep very well. In fact, by this point, say April or May of 2013, I was ready to get back to work. I'd gained a bunch of weight, so you can see in videos from then. And I still wasn't, still had a lot of this residual pain from or just this numbness from that bout of illness where I couldn't really, like, it's weird. It's like, to me, watching movies, it's almost like eating food and breathing. It's almost like the same as that for me. Imagine eating food and not being able to taste much of anything, or even everything tastes bitter in a way, like some kind of horrible chemical. That's sort of how it was for movies for me too. Like, I couldn't really feel the emotions. And when I can't process movies and have them internalized, it's like I'm not even here. I'm not a person. That's all I care about in a way. I really love film. That's meant everything to me. That's how I see the world. That's why I say about, like, what I realized just recently with all the job applications I've been going through and just job searching, is that no matter what, I have to make movies. It's just, I have to. And that was a good thing to think about. I'm like, oh, okay, great. Because I never understood, like, well, is this just something I want to do that I happen to do every day? Now I understand I need to. So finally, like, it was still a struggle to sort of watch movies, try and process them. It wasn't as easy to sort of rebuild myself the way I could before. Then my brother attacked me. I moved out. Then I moved to Annandale. I moved to one other place then, to the preacher who hit on me every day, closeted gay preacher, who hit on me every single day. I lived with him for a month. Then I moved to Annandale. And by then I was still miserable. I was working 2 jobs. Basically the next year, I was really depressed. I slept 3 hours a night because I still had huge problems sleeping after that illness. I did manage to lose some weight. I starved myself for a month, basically lost 15 pounds because I was disgusted with myself, with the weight I had gained. I got up to 200 pounds. Just for reference, I'm 100. I weighed myself at the doctor's office a few weeks ago. I was 162 pounds then. A few weeks ago. At my heaviest, I was like 200 or more. So I lost 15 pounds in 1 month just starving myself. And then lost like nothing the next 2 years because starving myself sucked. But anyways, for that next year, I seriously couldn't sleep more than like 3 hours a night. And so I was miserable constantly. That was still torture, thinking, am I ever going to sleep normally again? I couldn't nap even if I was bitterly exhausted, because I had this compulsive energy in me. Thank goodness I could work, I could drive, I could at least get back into all that, but I wasn't really able to enjoy myself the way I can now, where things are meaningful. I was still bitterly lonely, working 7 nights a week basically, or really 13 nights in a row, 1 day off, then 13 nights. So basically 1 day off every 2 weeks. And doing videography and doing YouTube videos. By the way, by this time we had already shot Tim's cook-off. And so you see the picture on that. Actually, on my YouTube channel, the banner, you can see a picture of us, my mom and I, with Tim and Eric. You can see how big I was there. But that was shortly after I got sick and was just starting to recover. And got the job where I am now as a bouncer, and at other bars too. So that next year, I was sleeping 3 hours a night just because I couldn't. It was so tough. It was difficult. And then I told the story of being sick or disabled for 9 months, partly as a way to just connect with others because I felt so horribly lonely. I was having nightmares about sort of past relationships and stuff that had ended, and feeling so alone, like I was being taunted with them. Like I was seeing somebody I was close to or cared about, but they were laughing in a way, like showing like, hey, they don't care about me anymore. And it was really tough and painful. It was the worst thought, thinking I'll never sleep normally again. I can't believe I went through. And what would happen, I would fall asleep standing up. I would fall asleep driving, not totally passing out and crashing, but I was seriously, like, my eyes would be open and I would fall asleep because I was like, white knuckling it, trying to stay. I would literally slap myself in the car to stay awake, roll down the windows, do anything, driving home so exhausted, and then still only able to sleep 3 hours. So after about a year, I was able to start sleeping somewhat normally again. Not always, but then it was getting more normal. Now I'm 4 or 5 years out from that. Basically, after about a year, I was able to sleep normally. Still felt very lonely and depressed. Struggled to connect more, struggled with my YouTube videos, struggled thinking, what am I going to do? Where am I going to live? I hate living in Annandale. And I made that Annandale video when I had basically just gotten able to sleep well again. I think September 2014. It wasn't until a year and a half later, in like May 2015, that it went viral and got 1.3 million views. So I hadn't yet had that success, that validation that felt so good by that point, because then I could accept the validation. I had a video go viral before that, but I felt so sad afterwards thinking, well, what do I do now? It means nothing in a way. I mean, I'm happy for it, but it didn't help much. So by then I'd still think about it. By this point, still never really had much in the way of connections with people in my life, relationships, friendships. I was really hating myself still, especially while I was working, bouncing in bars. I was thinking, like, I just want to, like, rip my face off and kill myself. I felt so miserable and alone. I was in a bad mood constantly. It didn't really affect my job performance. Well, I didn't treat people badly, so I was not like a power tripping bouncer at all. In fact, I was the other way. I would try and be friendly with people who would ultimately want to fight me. And I did get sucker punched one time because I thought, hey, we can be cool. Now I wouldn't let a guy sneak behind me like I did with them, but I just went up, talked to these guys who were harassing somebody. But I was in a bad mood constantly at work, wanting to sort of not seriously kill myself, but mad enough at myself, thinking, oh, I just want to kill myself. And as a result, I was like never smiling, and I still sort of never smile in a way, but I try and be more pleasant and cheerful now. At the time, I was just so serious all the time, in a bad mood, didn't want to talk to people. Now I actually enjoy it. I really do enjoy bouncing. I'm glad I have that, and that's the kind of work I'll look for in the future, for some extra work, 1 or 2 days a week at least, to make some extra money. But that was still, like at like 29, 30, it was like, okay, now, and I was shocked I was able to have a life again. I was shocked. It was hard to accept. That was depressing. Thinking, how did I get through this illness? It wasn't meaningful. It's not like, oh, I feel like I survived that. I'm glad I did. To this day, it's upsetting thinking about, how could I get that sick? How could a person get that sick and then be a person? How could I lose my identity and get it back? How can I be that person again? In a way, there's a little bit of that fog that I realize now, thinking about it, never quite cleared up. Thank goodness lately it really has been a lot better. And I've been able to focus more and not, but I'll always have in my head these sort of delusions that can come up, and I've been good at, dealing with just building up in my mind the strength, the sort of mental muscle memory to be back in reality, but they're always sort of threatening to be there like weeds that if somehow they grew would just overcome me again. I don't feel like I'd ever get that sick again though. Somehow this time feels different, but it still is upsetting to me to think, how did I get that sick, lose my identity, and come back and be sort of a normal person? I was diagnosed with schizophrenia that time I got sick for those 9 months. Oh, my throat's getting sore from talking so much. But I was diagnosed with schizophrenia. I don't know if I have it or not. Maybe I do. I don't know. I hate saying that. Bipolar disorder, depression, well, okay, that one, yeah, I definitely pretty much had since I was 15. But it's troubling to me to still think, like, how am I myself again? And in a way, it's like I've never quite become myself again, felt like myself, because how can I go through that and then forget it and not think I'm a person who's capable of completely losing my identity and losing who I am and just becoming this sick person that's psychotic, delusional, lying in bed trying to watch TV and not even understanding that those are people that are on TV and that they're doing the news. Like, just not understand, what is this? It's like seeing something for the first time from another dimension, or like a human being who just woke up for the first time in 1,000 years and has no previous memories. Like, they're not going to be able to speak or take care of themselves or do anything. It was like having to learn everything all over again. And just think, how do you process that? How do I even, that's why I don't think about it. How do I figure that I'm a person who got that sick, was one totally different person? I was still sort of myself, but trapped in this mind that couldn't let me go. And then go back to where I am now. Never quite all the way the same, because now I know what it's like to be that. So it's like I'm the person that went through that. and knows that life may not always be there, like, or mentally I may not always be there. It's always sort of a struggle, and I realized that lately. Like, every time I think I've thought I've like overcome this stuff so many times. When I was 20, I thought, great, I'm done with it. I never have to deal with anything again. Then sure enough, I would get in horrible, lonely depression, mood swings, angry, bitter, feeling like my life is over, and not understanding, by the way, that I needed lots and lots of counseling. So if there's any message of this video, is that counseling helps tremendously. Read books, do things that are meaningful, try and set goals that are meaningful. I couldn't do that when I was sick. It makes me sick to think about it now, saying that, because I could not do that. It did not matter. There was no future. It was blind luck in a way that I recovered from that. Each time I was sick, blind luck, because how do you control that, whether you do or not? You can't. Now I have this like darkened view of things too, that every time I think I've overcome it, like, oh, I'm good. I'm just good now. I'm done. I realize it's always there. As much as I thought I would love this, love that, whatever, get into this, realize, the euphoria of jumping into a new situation can sort of dull all that for a little bit. But then after a while realize, oh, I'm still here. I'm still the guy with crazy mood swings. I don't like to say crazy, just with who, and it doesn't make me a bad person at all. Not that aspect. It just makes me a person that realizes I have my limitations. I have big limitations, severe limitations. And yet, with those limitations come great opportunities. For whatever reason, also by luck, I love movies. Even when I was 20 and, feeling horrible and thinking, my life has just I've been abandoned and nothing, I don't care about, I seriously wasn't striving for anything much other than just be a filmmaker and die. I thought I was racing towards death. I didn't think I'd ever have meaningful relationships or anything like that. Even then I was wondering, like, how is it that movies are so perfect for me? How that I'm so perfectly attuned for this, that it makes me feel so strongly and with such certainty. So that's another thing, by the same measure, by the same luck, and it's good that, hey, I can have that depth of feeling about movies and know I want to tell such intense, moving stories. So anyways, I could belabor the point even further. I went probably as long or longer than my other video about this, but at least, hey, the audio is better now, except for that one section. I'm sorry, I fucked up the microphone. So it shouldn't be horrible, the in-camera audio, but there'll be a difference. So that's it. That's what I went through. There's no lesson. It just happened. That's it. But if there's anything that can benefit someone else, it's, for one thing, I can't understand why counseling, therapy aren't like mandatorily taught as far as their importance in school every single grade, because you can't be reminded of it enough. So many people try, and which is what I did, and in many ways, part of life, what I'll do anyways, try and manage their problems and cope with them by bad strategies, maladaptive strategies, and strategies that don't let them get responsible for being well. So instead, people look at therapy like as something for crazy people or for weak people, instead of looking at it as it's for responsible people who want to make a decision about their well-being. And so people don't go to therapy, and they end up reliving their trauma and acting out their trauma in their own life and on others, abusing others, abusing themselves, engaging in self-destructive behavior, medicating with drugs and alcohol, things that just don't work, that no matter how much you think you may master the trauma you've gone through by reliving it, there's no limit to the amount of pain you'll go through. You think I've done it, I've mastered it, it's over, and in reality, it's going to be so much worse, and there's just no limit to that pain. But on the flip side, when you get clarity with yourself, when you go to counseling and therapy, when you read books, reading books helped with my depression, to about anything, basically. One book I really enjoyed, Michael J. Fox, the actor, Lucky Man. talking about his life getting into acting. He was an alcoholic, and he was forced to stop drinking when he got Parkinson's disease. And he said it was like the gift that keeps on taking, because it forced him to confront this problem. He was drinking partly because he said he felt like an imposter, like a phony. He never graduated from high school, yet he had this great career acting, and he always felt like he didn't deserve it. And he said he acted poorly, not acted in films poorly, but he treated people poorly, and he needed to be held to account for that. And Parkinson's disease was what made him become more responsible with himself, or accountable with himself. Therapists, by the way, aren't there to give you advice. They're there to listen. So even when my therapist could have given me some good advice about some, really negative thoughts I had towards others, he would just listen and let them be valid, my thoughts. And when you hear your own thoughts, you can get clarity with them. Instead of being these big, huge, monstrous things which are always lurking around the corner and have such power over you and have such a pull over you, they become things that you hear yourself say. And then you hear someone listening to them. And they become much less powerful, and they take their appropriate place. And you get clarity on them. Now, it's always a struggle, because you can go to therapy and then after a while forget all the lessons you learned. And that's just what happens. And I constantly have to relearn those lessons myself. Now, obviously, there's an aspect of my illness that can't be treated by therapy, which is the psychosis, the delusions, the hallucinations. So that's the only benefit I could say from this video, if anything. Get therapy, recognize that where there's a maladaptive way of coping with something, therapy is often a very good way of dealing with it. So many things can be dealt with therapy. It should be promoted so much more. It should be more widely accessed by people. I believe where more people want it and access it, it would get cheaper, and there's more ways we should be able to find it. More ways technology enables it by, for instance, there's websites where you can write to for advice from people that's a type of therapy, like elder advice, where there are elderly people who are volunteers to give advice for anybody who emails them a problem. It's just free. Talking to friends, talking to people you trust, talking to people who will listen, it helps so much. If I wasn't doing that, if I hadn't gotten therapy, I couldn't be doing what I do. I'd just be an absolute I can recall it. It's not like it ever goes away. By the way, therapy doesn't fix you. It doesn't fix anything. Sean Stevenson, he's a therapist, he would say, I can't fix you because you're not broken. It doesn't fix anything. I'll still have the same problems if I let them, keep festering in me. What it is a way of developing tools to cope with them in ways that work for you, that are to your advantage, that are actually healthy, that give you some long-term wellness. So that's what I can give as a benefit for other people hearing this, because even though, the psychosis can't be dealt with therapy, the hallucinations, the schizophrenia, it makes me cringe to say it, but that's what I was diagnosed with, whether I have it or not. Bipolar disorder, again, I don't take medicine for this stuff, so I don't know if I really have it, but I don't want to play too skeptical of the doctors. I'm just saying, well, certainly I can't deny that I've had serious delusions and hallucinations and psychosis. I'm not proud of it, I'm not ashamed of it, just what it is. Hey, if any species that evolves to the point we do, it's bound to have some, problems, some not so smooth functioning. Even though that can't be treated with therapy, the depression that sets in and all the other negative feelings can be treated. Those feelings of depression that come from, experiencing that loss and that sense of despair from being that sick, that can be treated with therapy. So there's a little takeaway. I realize I very likely did speak for as long or longer than the other video, but I hope this one's easier to watch because I'm not walking around in circles and don't have that creaky microphone wobbling around on the camera. I actually have this one right here. Let's pull that out of frame. Whoops, a little noise it made. So thanks for watching. Hope this was an interesting story. Certainly hope it's fun. It doesn't bother me as much to talk about it now, but I'd be happy to never talk about it again. I told it because I thought, well, it's worth. I'm a storyteller. I have to tell stories. I believe in telling stories that make sense to me. It's how I see the world, and I like a good dramatic story. So, subscribe, like the video, leave a comment. Don't leave me sympathy. I don't want sympathy. Fortunately, I'm able to do pretty well, and again, it's still hard to believe I'm the person that got that sick, because I definitely still see my life as something different before and after. Like, almost the possibilities have shrunk down just a tiny bit of what I can be and what I can perceive mentally. But I don't know. Good. Fortunately, there's a lot I can do. I have a lot of freedom, and I'm going to keep working. And so, again, don't leave sympathy. Just leave your comments, your questions. Share the video. Subscribe to the channel. I don't even know how to transition into a normal ending for a video. Watch movies. Hey, support filmmakers. There's one. I'm a filmmaker. So, alright. Thanks again.